Hello, and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It is a privilege to have Brad Larschan here today, CEO of Avadain Graphene, live on Net Capital, top campaign over there, here to talk about all the revolutionary things that are happening at their offices and their overall growth, their overall momentum using equity crowdfunding. Brad, pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. It's a real pleasure.
And it's been exciting to watch your campaign. We're going to get into that, but thought we'd start with your background, maybe familiarize the audience a bit with your career.
Sure. I started out life as an international lawyer. I worked for a Wall Street firm in their Washington, D.C. office and decided what I really wanted to do was be an entrepreneur. I moved to London, started my first business there, licensing high-end British goods in Japan first, and then in the US as a catalog company. And in the course of that, wound up using Federal Express for our global logistics, and that got off to a rocky start. So we moved from London to Memphis, Tennessee, never having been here before, wound up selling that company several years later and decided to stay. And we've been in this Memphis area ever since. We got involved in investment in .com companies and then in developing technologies for trucking and logistics companies. And in the course of that, wound up acquiring a large patent portfolio that was fundamental to the US wireless network. We then licensed that network broadly. And that led us to a partnership with a law firm called Fish & Richardson, the #1 US IP law firm. Together with them, we formed a company called Bastille, the Bastille Program, where we represent universities and research institutions all over the world. And we identify potentially disruptive technologies at a very early stage, generally pre-patenting. And then we take those all the way through the development cycle, obtain patents for them, and commercialize those technologies. And in fact, it was through that effort that we first came across the graphene technology we're here to talk about today, and that was in 2016.
So I've always been fascinated by your chapters, talking about the beginning with international law, moving over to Europe, to London, everything that you were able to accomplish in that space, and actually how that brought you over through those different obstacles to Memphis. And have been out towards your way in meetings. I understand that's where it all started for you, and thought we could go a layer deeper into your technology, because I know it's really out to revolutionize and turn verticals upside down in terms of what resources they use. Can you talk more about the potential of graphene?
Absolutely. In 2016, researchers at the Fraunhofer Institute for Applied Solid-State Physics had an idea of how to manufacture very high-quality graphene. And they asked me if I would come over and meet with them with a view to having the Bastille program take it in and help to develop it. And I'd never even heard of graphene before. And so I did a quick research on it as much as I could prior to the meeting, and was amazed that graphene was actually a completely disruptive material. Much the way that plastics was to the 20th century, graphene is to the 21st century. Graphene is added to a broad range of existing products to make them lighter, stronger, thinner, whatever the characteristics are. Graphene itself is a single atomic layer of graphite. And graphite, of course, is what you use in a pencil. We call it pencil lead, but it's not lead at all. It's graphite. And it's very abundant, very plentiful. But when you separate the atomic layers, graphene takes on an almost miraculous range of qualities. For example, it is the best electrical conducting material ever discovered. It's much better as a conductor than electricity, than copper, pardon me. And it's a better heat conductor than any materials that are available. It's 200 times stronger than steel. And so if you took a single atomic layer of graphene and you put a pencil on top of it and put an elephant on top of that pencil, it wouldn't pierce the single atomic layer of graphene. That is the strength of graphene. And it's also incredibly clear. It's significantly clearer than glass itself. So it has a wide variety of applications, from supercapacitors to electric vehicle batteries, where it will enhance the performance dramatically, to de-weighting rockets, making satellites lighter, stronger, and resistant to space debris. So it's a material that everyone is going to have in their lives in the immediate future.
And I love the picture that you paint there. We've had these discussions where batteries, electric vehicles, just application one after another. It's abundantly clear that this is a strong potential of being the future if and just keeping it safe with that forward-looking statement. It's very clear the possibilities of graphene. How come more groups aren't doing this? I know you've shared with me others have attempted it, but it's not quality material. It's not getting into the full potential, if I'm not mistaken.
The graphene was discovered by two researchers at the University of Manchester in 2004, and they won the Nobel Prize in Physics for that discovery in 2010. And right around 2010, there was a gold rush of companies that were starting up because each of them claimed to have the way to manufacture graphene. Well, most of those companies went out of business. And the reason is that it's not easy to manufacture graphene. And one of the reasons for that is that being carbon, graphene is pure carbon. When you separate the atoms, then those atoms tend to bond with oxygen atoms. The carbon-oxygen bond is incredibly strong. And that introduces defects into the material that you create. And then it doesn't have a lot of these qualities. It is not a good conductor. It is not that strong. And so researchers and companies who started to attempt to fill the demand and create the graphene revolution ran into a lot of technical obstacles. The group in Fraunhofer that did the original research actually conceived of a way to manufacture graphene whereby you could keep the large flake size, make thin graphene, just maybe 2 to 4 atomic layers thick, and reduce or virtually eliminate the defects. And that is the secret of this particular technology, and that we have patented globally.
And it's amazing to hear how you guys are a standout in that reason. And that picture you paint moving from plastics, I know in between is silicon into graphene. I bet if you go further enough back, it's Stone Age. And, I think you had mentioned copper and different types of metal all the way up to steel. The fact of 200 times stronger to steel always stands out to me. Are groups open to partnerships with you around this? We've talked about some of the industries that you would be able to touch. I imagine there's a lot of conversation going on a weekly basis about potential use cases of graphene.
Absolutely. Right now, our challenge is creating samples so that we can then meet the requests of potential partners really all across the United States and even across the world. We're trying to upscale our technology now. We recently won a $3.77 million federal grant to pay for the upscaling of that technology. And we've got great partners at Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio who are doing that upscaling work. And as we produce samples, we will be sending them to potential partners. But I think industry is wary because there have been so many claims, so many exaggerated claims made to be able to actually manufacture graphene in the past. So we're taking this step by step, and we're working with our a wide range of partners who really want the benefit of graphene and need a source of graphene flakes.
It's interesting how you talk about poor, bad quality graphene, even a war or resistance on this based on some of the companies that came beforehand.
Well, there's no lack of poor quality graphene in the world. In fact, China dominates the supply of the poor quality graphene. According to at least one estimate I've read, 70% of that poor quality graphene is manufactured in China. And that's called graphene oxide or reduced graphene oxide. And that the name gives you a clear idea of what it is. It's the carbon bonded with oxygen, and that's where the defects occur. But there are really great and socially beneficial uses for that low quality material anyway. What the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers pioneered, and now is a rapidly expanding use of this poor quality graphene, is to add it to roadways when they're being built. That this poor quality graphene strengthens the roads, meaning they can last longer. It also introduces a degree of flexibility. Graphene is very flexible. And so as the road expands from the heat, the graphene helps the road to keep its shape. And then when the cold weather comes and the roadway contracts, the graphene also enables a degree of contraction so that you can, to some degree, mitigate the potholes and cracks that we see on roads all around the world. So tons of graphene flakes can go into concrete that's used or asphalt that's used to pave roads with. And that's going to have a very long-term effect on reducing the total concrete level that you need. And concrete, of course, is probably the biggest producer of CO2 in the world, is the manufacture of concrete. So that's a great use. We're focused on the really high-end uses, the high-value uses in electronics, in sensors, in water filtration, in batteries, to enable more rapid charging and discharging of batteries. So those are what we focus on with the high-quality graphene.
And I've read recently about graphene sheets. I know you guys are flakes. So that's where you're really focusing on detect-free flakes. When you look at sheets, is sheets more of that poor quality, some of the stuff coming out of China, as you had mentioned, or what is the differentiator between sheets of graphene and flakes? I think there's some misconceptions there.
Sure. There are a lot of misconceptions about sheets and flakes. Flakes are just what it sounds like. You take the graphite is composed of flakes of graphene, and you separate those flakes from the graphite. So you use graphite, which is very abundant as a natural source. You use electrochemistry to separate it. It's a very easy process. It's also environmentally friendly. There are no harsh chemicals. There's no adverse environmental effects from that. It's a very easy process. Once you understand the process parameters, it's a very easy process, and it's a very inexpensive process. Creating graphene sheets actually starts with the raw material methane, which of course itself is a very negative and harmful substance that the government is trying to control because there's too much methane in the greenhouse gases that are emitted into the atmosphere. So you take the methane, you chemically separate that, so that the carbon layers line a sheet of copper, and they take the shape of the top of the sheet of copper. And when that sheet has the carbon atoms arranged on it, that creates a single sheet of graphene. The problem with that is that it takes toxic chemicals in order to separate the methane into the carbon atoms. And then when you take the sheet off of the copper substrate, it tends to either tear or introduce defects. That process is very difficult. The process parameters have to be precise, and it's an expensive process. And a lot of work has gone in by a lot of smart people into trying to make that work. but it still doesn't have the versatility of the flakes. The graphene sheets might someday be a replacement for silicon in semiconductors. That's an example of a potential use of a sheet, because you could have the wafer and the wafer would have a sheet of the graphene. And if technical problems of the band gap could be solved, then graphene might replace silicon and take semiconductors to the next level. But that's somewhere 10, 15 years off in the future. Whereas flakes are really a simple process. You take the flakes and add them to what existing material you have. Let's say you want to have a commercial airliner. Richard Branson has for years advocated de-weighting commercial airliners by adding graphene to the composites that are used to create the hull, the outer shell of the aircraft. Well, the aircraft is heavy. It has to be heavy because that has to be a very strong shell to support the weight and to protect the people in it. You could take out layers of composite by adding graphene to the existing composite and de-weight the aircraft, meaning you would burn less fuel, you would reduce the carbon footprint, and the plane could actually go further because the fuel would propel it further because the weight was less, there was less resistance. And so that's an example of the types of uses of graphene flakes. We tested graphene flakes in a supercapacitor in Germany and found that compared to other conductive materials such as reduced graphene oxide, and activated carbon, which is carbon black, a very, very tiny amount, 0.5% by volume of high quality graphene, our graphene flakes, actually dramatically improved the performance of the supercapacitor over the currently existing materials. So the next question might be, how much did that cost? Well, the cost to gain that improvement would be somewhere between $4 and $6. So you're eliminating reduced graphene oxide, which tends to be very expensive, and creating a better, significantly better performing supercapacitor by using a better material. So that's the difference between sheets and flakes. And we want to now test our flakes side by side in electric vehicle batteries to demonstrate that we can have faster charging and discharging, as well as adding to the capacitance of the electric vehicle battery.
And have that side by side measurement, right and left, we say. So the way to measure is with numbers. So beyond just statements of how this is going to be impacting the world, looking at that actual case study.
Absolutely. We have compelling data in supercapacitors. Now we need to have equally compelling data in electric vehicle batteries. That's our next project.
The supercapacitors, and as you said, in comparison to the graphene oxide, that's already there, but have it in something that is more common and more relatable. Electric cars, very prevalent in California, Tennessee, that there are going to be more and more mandates around using these vehicles in the future. So understanding the adoption there really paints the picture of where this can all go.
Absolutely. And it's a great growing market. So as good as supercapacitors are, and that's a big market, electric vehicle batteries are even bigger.
And part of the value of your company, organization, is actually the manufacturing technology around it. So we've already talked about how valuable the material is and all of the different applications, but can you speak a little bit about your manufacturing technology? I know you guys hold some patents and what that means for the future of the organization.
Sure. The market is in a very unusual position with graphene. There are about 60,000 patents issued, granted globally on the use of graphene to improve products or to make new products. But there's really no source for large, thin, and defect-free graphene flakes in industrial quantities at an affordable price. And so these hundreds of applications for enhancing products with graphene are on hold until there is a source for graphene flakes. So we have focused on how to upscale the manufacturing to industrial volumes at a really very affordable price. That's what our company focuses in on, and that's what our technology is about. We've filed 3 patent applications globally. The first patent application has been issued in 10 countries and is pending in 19. The second and third applications are all pending around the world in those same countries. So our interest is to license our technology to companies who are either used to manufacturing advanced materials or who have a mission critical need. For example, I would imagine that electric vehicle battery companies might want to manufacture graphene flakes for themselves so that they can assure the supply chain. It's not expensive to do, and they may want to have that under their control to vertically integrate. But certainly tier 1 defense contractors will want to manufacture the flakes for their own needs. They don't want to be dependent upon third-party sources. So there's really a very substantial market need that exists for graphene flakes, for high-quality graphene flakes. And we're not going to manufacture the flakes ourselves, as you alluded to, but rather to license our technology to people with the expertise to manufacture those flakes.
And it's such a standout, the team that you've been able to build, the grants, these partners, all of these different strategic relationships. How have you been able to do it? How have you been able to really fuel your own growth? You have the technology, now you're doing the actual activation, the actual rollout. How have you been able to make sure all of these milestones have been met?
Well, I've got to say that having a technology that really excites people, that really gets them burning with desire to do something exciting and world changing is really the key. We've really been blessed with finding really great partners, everywhere we've turned. Panasonic Corporation was our original financing partner to help with the development of the technology. Fish and Richardson did the patenting, and there's no better law firm than them to do it. We've been able to attract the federal grant, as I alluded to, the $3.77 million. The Rapid Manufacturing Institute, which is based in Manhattan. It's a collaboration between the Department of Energy and the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, is our project manager, and then Southwest Research Institute. The list goes on. And, the people who have joined our team are just first rate. And now we're looking to expand the team and hopefully attract equally great people who are committed to bringing this graphene manufacturing technology into reality just as soon as possible.
And I had to ask, I mean, the execution has definitely been clear in terms of the success, and, from academic papers to local coverage and tapping into different investor groups. It seems like there's always new momentum for the organization.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate. Despite the headwinds from the market decline and inflationary fears, since we've gone live on Net Capital, we've had very strong momentum. I think all but 3 days we've been the number one trending offering on Net Capital, meaning we've attracted more capital every day. A year ago, it probably would have been a lot easier than it is today, but that doesn't mean we aren't trying, and things are going well so far. The trend line is great, and we have nothing to complain about. And of course, working with Digital Niche Agency has helped in that a lot because it's your advice and your team's advice, which is, and their talent, which has really helped to propel our momentum.
And we appreciate that. I always point out the founders, though, as an agency, we're really working on behalf of you, on behalf of your team. And we say the most proactive founders are the most successful in these types of initiatives. For any audiences that aren't familiar, we're referring to regulation crowdfunding, Reg CF. Net Capital is a portal, a site where Avadain Graphene's investment offering is available, and driving investors there's something we've been able to participate in. But at the same time, Brad, it's you've been pointing to talking about each piece of media, each new partnership. I know we really only scratched the surface on some of the groups that you just mentioned there. So it is really a team effort, and that's what I wanted to point out. And if you had any recommendations for groups that were running an investor marketing campaign, it could be on an equity crowdfunding portal, it could just be as a whole. Would there be any tips that you would have for them? Maybe it's towards entrepreneurial growth as a whole. Are there things that you would recommend testing out and implementing into their model?
Oh, the first thing I would say is that the senior management team has to be committed to and willing to work hard at growth. And if attracting funding through crowdfunding is part of that growth, that means actually actively being out there every day working on it. There's never any end to the things that you can do to move the needle. And it may be a little bit at a time, but cumulatively the results are obvious to all. It's very easy. I wouldn't just assume that you could do crowdfunding and expect that all by itself you will raise money. That is definitely not the case. On the other hand, if you can distinguish yourself and let the general public know what you're committed to, what your passion is for that technology, how it can help the world, and how they can make money from it, then you have a clear path to success, provided that you work at it every single day. Now, in terms of optimization,
Yes.
we've obviously tried many different things. Some work, some don't work. The point is not to try to avoid failure, but to learn from failure. And so you try something, it doesn't work. The question is why? Talk to smart people like you and your team, get their advice, their analysis of why it doesn't work, and then try something else. Look at what seems to be working and then ask, how can we do more of that? And so every week we go through with your team the process of saying, okay, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and given what has worked, what else can we do that looks like that can help us to move forward another inch? And that's the process of building from a solid base.
And it means so much to hear that background, because as you're saying that, I'm picturing optimization type discussions you've had in past chapters of your career, at Bastille, in international law. You've had successful exits. You've been down this road before. And
Right.
I really want to point out, echo what you had said of don't be afraid as much as looking for learnings. There will be failures in some marketing headlines, in some different partnerships, in different angles that you're using in any of your external communications. But be prepared to learn from those, focus on what's really driving. I know social proof and third-party validation, again, even just hearing you talk about the Panasonics and all of the different groups involved, the grant really shows strong validation and third-party proof endorsement even. So I know that's been a key driver for you, but it's an instrumental part to include the optimizations. And it seems like you guys have been able to note that and find the best learnings.
Well, we're trying. You never get to perfection. It just doesn't happen. But what you can do is you can get better every day, and that's what we're trying to do. And I think the results speak for themselves. You can go on the King's Crowd site and track Avadain's progress, as I do every single day when I get up in the morning. and then compare it to how the market is doing generally, how other crowdfunding campaigns are doing. Of 488 active crowdfunding campaign in the last reported period, we were number 7 out of 488. And I think that's really great. I couldn't be happier. We don't have a product, we have a deep technology. And so will probably not be the strongest campaign ever. Those tend to be product companies that people can identify with and get excited about. But there are a lot of investors who understand that investing in a validated deep tech opportunity can be very exciting and rewarding. And when I say validated, I mean, it's not just that Panasonic did their research and decided to invest. We have a peer-reviewed paper, we have granted patent and patents pending. But the people, the companies that want samples and want to integrate the graphene flakes into their products, that to me is the ultimate validation. Who's going to buy this? And we're just scrambling to try to create samples so that we can show people, okay, we have all the laboratory data. We put almost all of the data on our website so people can look at it. But that's really different than having their own scientists and their own researchers take the sample flakes and then duplicate those results. And that's where the rubber meets the road.
That will be the next set of evolutions from there. That's what separates you guys from other groups in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to happen this autumn.
Fall, we'll be looking forward to it. And, one of the things that we really are fond of for equity crowdfunding is the volume of investors, the volume of ambassadors that will be talking about Avadain Graphene, moving forward and really championing every news article that you get, maybe bringing different relationships to the table in terms of press, distribution, technology. We've seen this happen with other issuers. We've read about it in different articles. So we see a lot of those benefits and, hope to see those emerge further for you. Are there other things that stood out to you about equity crowdfunding that influenced your decision to go down this path?
Well, there were really two things. The first point was that the venture capital community took what I considered to be ridiculously low valuation to the company. We have approximately $5.8 million of dilutive and non-dilutive capital in so far, and quite a number of venture capital companies were willing to put a $5 million value on the company if they were to invest. Well, we just didn't think that was reasonable or fair, given where we're at. On the other hand, by going through the crowdfunding route, we were able to take a very reasonable valuation of $20 million and attract a lot of capital and attention. We've got over 700 investors now. I hope that by the time we end, we'll have more than 1,000 investors. And this gives everyday people, ordinary folks, the opportunity to invest without having to go through a fund or some middleman. It's an opportunity for everyday people who are accredited or unaccredited to invest whatever they feel comfortable with. And that has introduced me to some really incredibly wonderful people who I've developed relationships with as a result of the process of answering their questions, virtual meetings, and getting to know them. And so I guess those are the nuts and the bolts, right? The numbers speak for themselves in terms of the opportunity that crowdfunding offers. And then there's the other benefit of meeting a lot of great people who are sincerely interested. And also, new potential customers who hear about it because of the publicity that's being generated and want to learn more. So for me, it's been a win-win.
Absolutely. And one of the things that stood out to me about you, Brad, and about the campaign is how you guys have approached scale. We've talked about what to test, how to optimize. I've seen some founders see successful results, favorable performance from different campaigns, different channels, and slow down and say, we're working, everything's working, and it then allows them to plateau. A week, 2 weeks later, you guys have done the opposite. You've seen results, you've seen strong responses from some of the advertisements, some of the organic marketing you've done, and really leaned into it. I think that's been a key part of your scale and what's put you into that number 7 spot. Picture you going even higher from here, maybe even by the time this episode airs. But can you speak to scale at all and your
Sure.
overall perspective towards it, maybe past ventures through today?
Absolutely. We owned a catalog company, and there the key was scaling. You could waste your entire marketing budget and get no results. So the key was to test lists, test very relatively small but still statistically significant numbers of people on lists, and see which delivers the better results. And there you drop quickly those that don't perform, and those that do perform, you scale. And you don't go jump in the lake, feet first. You double, triple the list, and then test that again. And then if it's validated, then maybe you make a bigger bet. You make a bigger investment on scaling. And we've done the same thing here. We've started out very collaboratively with your team, with a relatively small budget, testing. And once your team felt that we had found the right digital marketing lists, profiles, I guess you would call them, then we started making a bigger bet. And as that bore out, as it got results, which we could measure those results, then we really jumped in feet first into the pond and began marketing in a more active and aggressive way. And the results speak for themselves. There's just no question about whether that was successful. It is. And hopefully, one never knows, but hopefully it will continue to be successful.
Absolutely. I like to base everything on the analytics. That's what the trends and projections are pointing towards. And as we begin to wrap up the discussion here, I feel like I could keep talking to you, seeing the clock staring at me here, but wanted to ask you, is there any other notes you'd like to leave the audience with about the organization? Final thoughts, final tips that they can test out, anything that we haven't got to in general, but any notes that you'd like to emphasize before we begin to wrap?
Well, the only thing I can say is that one of the comments I get most often is, well, how come you haven't moved quicker if your technology is so good? And the answer to that is that we wanted to build on a solid base. It took between 2016 and 2020 to get the technology perfected in a batch process. We then formed Avadain for the purpose of attracting capital. We attracted seed capital first so that we could then afford to pay for the digital marketing campaign for crowdfunding. We've started getting patents, continued filing patents, got the peer-reviewed paper. So we've tried to do everything that needed to be done to have a solid base so that we have a defensible position. And to me, we're now ready to go to prime time. Once we have the samples to send to companies, then we're where we need to be in the marketplace, meaning there there are any number of people who want to use graphene in their products. They're skeptical, they're hesitant because of the hype of the past, because of all the false promises that were made, the companies that failed. So I think we've done this substantively, and that's what I wanted to say, Jason, is that, we're now at that point where we can go public and say, here we are. If you want to test our flakes, we're very happy to talk to partners about that. And to me, it's all been worthwhile to get to this point. It's been 6 years of development, but now we're where we need to be.
There you go. And for all listeners, definitely recommend using your notes from today's discussion, applying them to your own entrepreneurial investor marketing initiatives. And Brad, if anyone's listening in here and saying, hey, we should really get in contact with Brad, whether it's about the Net Capital campaign or overall discussions, what is the best route for them to do so?
Well, the easy way is on the contact section on the avadaingraphene.com website, but I can be reached directly at Larschan, Larschan, at avadaingraphene.com. You can Google me and my email comes up very easily. You don't have to bother writing it down. It's, I'm very accessible. My primary mission is to be in communication, answering questions and dealing with investors. I take that on as a responsibility. We have good people on our team who can deal with licensees who are interested in licensing our technology, and with customers who want to use the graphene flakes. But we're all very available. That's part of what it takes to get where we need to be.
Exactly. Part of what's put you in this position now. And want to thank you, Brad, for coming on, sharing your wisdom about graphene, about your path, about the success in investor marketing. It's been a pleasure, fun conversation for me. And every conversation, I feel like I learn more. So appreciate the willingness to discuss with us on the show.
Well, I always have fun with you, Jason, and I learn a lot too. So it's mutual.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it's reflected on both sides. Also want to thank listeners, viewers for tuning in today. Appreciate any feedback and look forward to seeing you on future episodes. Thank you, everyone.